Story 4 of A Touch of Sun and Other Stories by Mary Hallock Foote. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Story 4, The Harshaw Bride, Part 4. There was no use in saying how pretty it was, so we resorted to the other note, of disparagement. I remarked that I should not think a pink sunbonnet would be ravishingly becoming to the average Snake River complexion, as I had seen it. That sunbonnet is becoming, you bet. Wait till you see the face inside it. Have you seen it? Quite frequently. Do you think Harshaw would sit there talking with her, as he does by the hour, if that sunbonnet was not becoming? As he does by the hour. And why have we not heard of her before? I requested to be told. Business, my dear. She is a feature of the scheme, quite an important one. She represents the hitch which is sure to develop early in the history of every live enterprise. Indeed? I said. And if Harshaw talked with her on business, I didn't see what his talking had to do with the face inside her bonnet. I don't say that it's always on business, Tom threw in significantly. Who is the lady in the pink sunbonnet, and what is your business with her? I demanded. I question the propriety of speaking of her in just that tone, said Tom, inasmuch as she happens to be a lady, somewhat off the conventional lines. She waters her own stock and milks her own cow, because the old Indian girl who lives with her is laid up at present with a fever. Her father was an artist, one of the great unappreciated. So that was her father painting the snowbank, I interrupted. Her father is dead, my dear, as you would have learned if you had listened to my story, but he lived here a good many years before he died. He had made a queer marriage, old man Decker tells me, and quarreled with the world on account of it. He came here with his disputed bride. She was somebody else's wife first, I believe, and there was a trifling informality about the matrimonial exchange, but it came out all right. They both died, and a sweeter, fresher little thing than the daughter, adamant, though, bedrock so far as we are concerned. What do you want that belongs to her? I asked. Her island, perhaps? Only right of way across it. But that's a detail. She is the owner of something else we do want, this piece of ground, he looked about him and waved his hand, and all this above us, where our power plant must stand, and our business is to persuade her to sign the lease, or if she won't lease, to sell it when we are ready to buy. We have to make sure of that piece of ground. This place is so confoundedly cut up with scenery and nonsense, there's not a spot available for our plant but this. We'll bridge the lagoon and make a landing on that point of birches over there. You will? And do you suppose she will sign a lease to empower you to wipe her off the face of the earth, abolish her and her pretty island at one fell swoop? She knows nothing yet about our designs upon her toy island. We haven't approached her on that. We could manage without it at a pinch. So good of you, I murmured. But we can't manage without a place to put our power house. She'll have to sign her own death warrant, of course. If you get a footing for your power house, you'll want the island next. I never heard of such grasping profanation. Well, if C.C. could see his way to fall in love with her, I wouldn't ask him to woo her in cold blood. It would be a monstrous convenient way to settle it. Why do you say such things before her? I asked Tom when we were alone. They are not pretty things to say in the first place. Have you noticed how she is always snubbing him? I thought at times somebody should try the counter snub. He's not solely dependent for the joys of life on the crumbs of her society. Do you suppose she cares whom he talks to, or whom he spends his time with? Perhaps she doesn't care. I should like to give her a chance to see if she cares, that's all. Tom's location notice being plain for all eyes to read, the mistress of the island naturally inquired what he wanted with the Snow Bank, and he, thinking she would see at once the value to her ranch of such a neighboring enterprise, frankly told her of his scheme. Nothing of its scientific interest, its difficulties, its commercial value, even its benefit to herself, appealed to the little islander. To her it was simply an attempt to alter and ruin the spot she loved best on earth, to steal her beautiful waterfall and carry it away in an ugly iron pipe. Whether the thing could be done, she did not ask herself. The design was enough. Never would she lend herself, or anything that was hers, to such an impious desecration. This was her position, which any child might have taken in defense of a beloved toy, but she was holding it with all a woman's force and constancy. I was glad of it, I said to Tom, and I hoped she would stand them off for all she was worth. But I am not really glad. What woman could love a waterfall better than her husband's success? There are hundreds of waterfalls in the world, but only this one scheme for Tom. But anent this hitch, it teases me a little, I confess, on Kitty's account, when Cecil meanders over to the island at all hours of the day. To be sure, it relieves Kitty of his company, but is she so glad, after all, to be relieved? It was last Friday, after one of Harshaw's entirely frank but perfectly unexplained absences, that he came into camp and inquired if there was any clam broth left in the kitchen. I referred him to the cook. Finding there was, he returned to me and asked if he might take a tin of it to Miss Malcolm for her patient. "Who is Miss Malcolm?" I asked. But, of course, who could she be but the lady of the island, where he spends the greater part of his time? He was welcome to the clam broth, or anything else he thought would be acceptable in that quarter, I said. And how was the patient? "Oh, she's quite bad all the time. She doesn't get about. I wonder if you'd mind, Mrs. Daly, if I asked you to look in on her some day. The old creature's in a sad way, it seems to me." Of course I didn't mind, if Miss Malcolm did not. Harshaw seemed to feel authorized to assure me of that fact. So I went first with Tom, and then I went again alone, leaving Harshaw in the boat with Kitty. Miss Malcolm's maid or manservant, or both, for she does the work of both, and looks in her bed, dressed in a flannel bed-sack, her head tied up in an old blue-knitted fascinator, less like a woman than anything I ever beheld, appears to have had a mild form of grippe fever, and having never been sick in her life before, she thought she was nearing her end. My simple treatment, the basis of which was quinine and whiskey, seemed to strike old Tamar favorably, and after the second visit there was no need to come again to see her. But by this time I was deep in the good books of her mistress, who knows too little of illness herself to appreciate how little has been done, by me at least, or how very little needed to be done after restoring the old woman's confidence in her power to live. The last time I saw her she still wore the blue fascinator, but with a man's hat on top of it. She was waddling toward the cow corral with half a haystack, it looked like, poised on a hay fork above her head. She was certainly a credit to her doctor, if not to her corsetiere, she and the haystack being much of a figure. Miss Malcolm's innocent gratitude is most embarrassing, really painful, under the circumstances, and the poor child cannot let the circumstances alone. She imagines I am always thinking about Tom's scheme. It is evident that she is, and not being exactly a woman of the world, out of the fullness of her heart her mouth speaketh. That would be all right if she would speak to somebody else. I don't want to take advantage of her gratitude, as she seems determined I shall do. "You must think me a very strained, sentimental creature," she said to me the last time, "to care so much for a few old rocks and a little piece of foamy water." "I didn't think so at all," I told her. "If I had lived there all my life, I should feel about the place just as she did." Here she began to blush and distress herself. "But think how kind you have all been to me. Mr. Harshaw was here every day after he found how ill poor Tamar was. He did so many things. He lifted her for one thing, and that I couldn't have done to save her life. And your 2 visits have simply cured her. And here I am making myself a stumbling block and ruining your husband's plans." I said he was quite capable of taking care of himself. "Does your husband want all the water?" she persisted. "Do I understand that he must have it all?" I supposed she was talking of the Snow Bank, and since she was determined we should discuss the affair in this social way, I said he would have to have a great deal; and I told her about the distance the power would have to be sent, and about the mines and the smelter and all the rest of it, for it was no use to belittle the scheme. I had got started unintentionally, and I saw by her face that I had made an impression. It was a small-featured, rather set, colorless face, not so pretty as Tom pretended, but very delicate and pure. But now it became suddenly the face of a fierce little bigot, and enthusiast to boot. "It shall never go through. Not that scheme. Not if—" Then she remembered to whom she was talking, and set her lips together, and 2 great shiny drops stood in her eyes. "Don't, you child," I said. "Don't worry about their old scheme. If it must come, it will come, but as a rule a scheme, my dear, is the last thing that ever does go through. There's plenty of time." "But I can't give in," she said. "No, I must try to hinder it all I can. I will be honest with you. I like you all. Of all the strangers who have come here, I never liked any people better. But your husband must not set his heart on all that water. It doesn't belong to him." "Does it belong to you, dear?" "The sight of it belongs to me," she said. "I will not have the place all littered up with their pipes and power plants. Look out there! Look at that! Has any one the right to come here and spoil such a lovely thing as that?" This is what it is to be the daughter of an artist. "And how about the other despoiler?" I asked. "The young man with the pneumatic pipe." "The pneumatic pipe," she repeated. "Pump, I mean. Is he to be allowed all over the place to do as he pleases? His scaling ladders are littering up the bluffs. Not that they incommode the bluffs any, but if I lived here I would want to brush them away as I would sweep the cobwebs from my walls." "I do not own the bluffs," she said in a distant, tremulous voice. But the true answer to my question, as I surmise, was the sudden helpless flush which rose wave upon wave, covering her poor little face, blotting out all expression but that of painful girlish shame. Here, if I'm not mistaken, will be found the heart of the difficulty. Miss Malcolm's sympathies are evidently with compressed air rather than with electrical transmission. I shall tell Tom he need waste no more arguments on her. Let him first compound with his rival of the pump. I suppose there is just such a low, big moon as this looking in upon you where you sit, you little dot of a woman, lost in the piazza perspectives of the Coronado; and you might think small things of our present habitation, a little tent among the bushes, with wind-blown weeds against the moon, shifting their shadow patterns over our canvas walls. But you'd not think small things of our Sand Springs Fall by night, that glimmers on the dark cliff opposite, cliff and mist-like cataract, and the low moon throwing the shadow of the bluff across it, all repeated in the stiller, darker picture of the lagoon. I shall not inflict much of this sort of thing upon you, but the senseless beauty of it all gives one a heartache. Why should it be here, where you and I shall never see it together, where I shall leave it soon, never to see it again? Tom says we are coming back, when the great scheme is under way. Ah, the scheme, the scheme! It looks very far away tonight, and so do some other schemes that I had set my heart on unaware, foolish old woman that I am. As if there was only one way in this world for young men and women to be happy. Harshaw brought me your sweet letter yesterday. It was stage day, and he went over the bluffs to the ferry mail box at the crossroads where the road to Shoshone Falls branches from the road to Bliss. I read to Kitty what you wrote me about the Garretts and their children, and the going to New York and then to Paris. Thank you so much, dear, for your prompt interest in my little bride that isn't to be. She had 2 letters of her own which she had read by herself, and afterward I thought she had been crying. But with her it is best not to press the note of sympathy. Neither does she like me to handle her affairs with gloves on, so to speak. So I plunged into the business in a matter-of-fact tone, and she replied in the same. Her objection is to going East to New York, and then to the other side. I had rather stay in California, she said, or anywhere in the West. Naturally, westward lies the way of escape from social complications. She is afraid of the Percifers and of meeting people she knows in Paris. But an offer like this was exceptional in this part of the world, I reminded her. A nurse for the boy, a maid, and only 2 little girls of 8 and 10 on her hands, and such nice people as the Garretts, who have been all over the world. Well, she said, I should certainly like to get away from here as soon as possible. From here, not from you, she added, looking me in the face. Her eyes were full of tears. We clasped hands on that. What is it? Has anything else happened? I asked, for I knew by her looks that something had. Oh, dear, she sighed, I should so like to take myself and my troubles seriously once in a while. No sooner do I try but something perfectly farcical is sure to happen. If I tell you this, promise me you won't laugh. It's indecent for me to laugh. Mama would never forgive me. The old dear, I'm so fond of him. The old dear, it seemed, is Micky's father, a very superior sort of father for such a son to have, but accidents will happen in the best regulated families. He is a gallant widower of fair estate, one of those splendid old club men of London, a very expensive article of old gentleman, with fine old-fashioned manners and morals, and a few stray impulses left, it would seem, by what follows. According to the father's code, the son has not conducted himself in his engagement to Kitty Comyn as a gentleman should. Thereupon the head of the house goes to Miss Kitty's mother and makes the amende honorable by offering his hand and heart and fortune to his son's insulted bride. The mother is touched and pleased not a little by this prompt espousal of her daughter's cause, and having wiped away all tears from her eyes, this gallant old gentleman is coming over to America for the first time in his life to make his proposal to the bride herself. He is not so old, to get down to particulars. 63 doesn't look so old to some of us as it does to Miss Kitty. He is in fine health, I doubt not, and magnificently preserved. Kitty's mother is not at all averse, as I gather, to this way of settling her child's difficulties. She rather pleadingly assures Kitty that Mr. Harshaw senior has solemnly sworn that this is no unpleasant duty he feels called on to perform, Not only his honor, but his affections are profoundly enlisted in this proposal. Kitty has had for years a sacred place in his regard, and from thinking of her as a daughter absolutely after his own heart, it is but a step to think of her in a still nearer, the nearest, relation. He begs her mother to prepare her for no perfunctory offer of marriage, but one that warms with every day's delay till he can take the dear child under his lifelong protection. Not to punish or to redress does he come, but to secure for himself and posterity a treasure which his son had trampled under foot. Somehow we did not feel like laughing, after all. Kitty, I think, is a little frightened. She cannot reach her mother, even with a cable dispatch, before this second champion will arrive. He's an awfully grand old fellow, you know. I could never talk to him as I do to the boys. If he thinks it his duty to marry me, I don't know if I can help myself. Poor Uncle George! I've always called him uncle, like his own nieces, who are all my friends. I never thought that I should be "pooring" Uncle George. But he can't have heard yet of Micky's marriage. Fancy his going down to the ranch to stay with Micky and that woman! And then for a girl like me to toss him aside, after such a journey and such kindness! I don't know how I shall ever have courage to do it. There are fine women in London who would jump at the chance of being Mrs. Harshaw, not Mrs. Micky, nor Mrs. Stephen, nor Mrs. Sidney, but Mrs. Harshaw. You understand?" I understood. "And now," she said, producing the second letter, "you will laugh, and you may." The envelope contained a notification, in due form, of the arrival from New York, charges not paid, of some £500 of second-class freight, consigned to Mrs. Harshaw, Harshaw's Ranch, Glenn's Ferry, via Basuka. "These things belong to me," said Kitty. "They cost me the last bit of money I had that was my own. Mrs. Percifer, who is so clever at managing, persuaded me I should need them directly on the ranch, curtains and rugs and china and heaven knows what. She nearly killed me, dragging me about those enormous New York shops. She said it would be far and away cheaper and better to buy them there. I didn't mind about anything, I was so scared and homesick. I did whatever she said. She saw to getting them off, I suppose. That must have been her idea, directing them to Mrs. Harshaw. She thought there would be no Kitty comin', no me, when these got here. And there isn't. This is not the Kitty comin' who left England. 6 weeks, is it, or 6 years ago?" "How did the letter reach you?" I asked. We examined the envelope. It bore the postmark, not of Bisuka, but of Glenn's Ferry, which is the nearest post office to the Harshaw Ranch. Micky's wife had doubtless opened the letter, and Micky, perceiving where the error lay, had reinclosed, but some one else had directed it, the postmaster probably, at his request, to Kitty at our camp. That was rather a nice little touch in Micky, that last about the direction. "Come, he is honest at the least," I said, whether Mrs. Micky would have scrupled or not. She could claim the things if she chose. "She is quite welcome," said Kitty. "I don't know what in the world I shall do with them. There'll be boxes and bales and barrels, enough to bury me and all my troubles. I might build me a funeral pyre." We fell into each other's arms and screamed with laughter. "Kitty, we'll have an auction!" I cried. "There's nothing succeeds like an auction out here. We'll sell the things at boom prices. We'll sell everything." "But the bride," said Kitty. "You will have to keep the bride." And without a moment's warning, from laughing till she wept, she began to weep in earnest. I haven't seen her cry so since she came to us, not even that miserable first night. She struggled with herself, and seemed dreadfully ashamed, and angry with me that I should have seen her cry. Did she suppose I thought she was crying because she wasn't going to be a bride after all? "Oh, Mrs. Daly, I feel so ill," were Kitty's first words to me when I woke this morning. I looked her over and questioned her, and concluded that a sleepless night, with not very pleasant thoughts for company, might be held responsible for a good share of her wretchedness. "What were you lying awake about? Your new champion, Uncle George?" I asked her. She owned that it was. "Don't you see, Mrs. Daly, mamma doesn't leave room for the possibility of my refusing him. And if I do refuse him, he'll simply take me back to England, and then, between him and mamma, and all of them, I don't know what may happen." "Kitty," I said, "no girl who has just escaped from one unhappy engagement is going to walk straight into another with her eyes wide open. I don't believe you could be so foolish as that." "You don't understand," she said, "what the pressure will be at home, in all love and kindness, of course. And you don't know Uncle George. He is so sure that I need him, he'll force me to take him. He'll take me back to England in any case." "And would you not like to go, Kitty?" "Oh, wouldn't I! But not in that way." She sat up in her flannel camp gown and began to braid up her loosened hair. "Kitty," I commanded, "lie down. You are not to get up till luncheon." "I have a plan," she said, "and I must see Cecil Harshaw. He must help me carry it out. There is no one else who can." "You have all day to see him in." "Not all day, Mrs. Daly. He must be ready to start to morrow. Uncle George will reach Bisuka on the 15th, not later. Cecil must meet him there, first to prepare him for Micky's new arrangement, and second to persuade him that he does not owe me an offer of marriage in consequence. Cecil will know how to manage it. He must know. I will not have any more of the Harshaws offering themselves as substitutes. It will be very strange if I cannot exist without them somehow." It struck me that the poor child's boast was a little premature, as she seemed to be making rather free use of one of the substitutes still, as a shield against the others. But it was of a piece with the rest of the comedy. I kept her in bed till she had had a cup of tea. Afterwards she slept a little, and about noon she dressed herself and gave Cecil his audience. But first, at her request, I had possessed him with the main facts and given him an inkling of what was expected of him. His face changed. He looked as he did after his steeplechase the day I saw him first, except that he was cleaner: grave, excited, and resolved. He had taken the bit in his teeth. When substitute meets substitute in a cause like this, I would have left them to have their little talk by themselves, but Kitty signified peremptorily that she wished me to stay, with a flushed, appealing look that softened the nervous tension of her manner. "I would do anything on earth for you, Kitty," Cecil said most gently and fervently, "but don't ask me to give advice, to Uncle George of all men, on a question of this kind, unless you will allow me to be perfectly frank." "It's a family question," said Kitty, ignoring his proviso. "I think it would get to be a personal question very soon between Uncle George and me. No, I meddled in one family question not very long ago." "It's very strange," said Kitty restlessly, "if you can't help me out of this in some way. I cannot be so disrespectful to him, the dear old gentleman. He ought not to be put in such a position, or I either. How would you like it if it were your father?" Cecil reddened handsomely at this home thrust. "I'd have a deuce of a time to stop him if he took the notion, you know. It's not exactly a son's or a nephew's business. There is only one way in which I can help you, Kitty, and you must know that." He had struck a different key, and his face was all one blush to correspond with the new note in his voice. I think I never saw a manlier, more generous warmth of ardor and humility, or listened to words so simply uttered in such telling tones. "What way is that?" asked Kitty coldly. "Forgive me, I could tell him that you are engaged to me." "That would be a nice way, to tell him a falsehood. I should hope I had been humiliated enough." She snatched her handkerchief from her belt and pressed it to her burning face. I rose again to go. "Sit still, pray," she murmured. "It need not be a falsehood, Kitty. Let it be anything you like. You may trust me not to take advantage. A nominal engagement, if you choose, just to meet this exigency, or—" "That would be cheating," cried Kitty. "The cheat would bear a little harder on me than on any one else, I think." "You are too good!" Kitty smiled disdainfully. "First you offer yourself to me as a cure, and now as a preventive." "Kitty, I think you ought at least to take him seriously," I remonstrated. "By all that's sacred, you'll find it's serious with me!" Cecil ejaculated. "Since when?" retorted Kitty. "How many weeks ago is it that I came out here by your contrivance to marry your cousin? Is that the way a man shows his seriousness? You sacrificed more to marry me to Micky than some men would to win a girl themselves." "I did, and for that very reason," said Cecil. "I should like to see you prove it." "Kitty, excuse me," I interrupted. "I would like to ask Mr. Harshaw one question, if he does not mind. Do you happen to have that picture about you, Mr. Harshaw?" I thought I was looking at him very kindly, not at all like an inquisitor, but his face was set and stern. I doubt if he perceived or looked for my intention. "That picture, Mrs. Daly?" he repeated. "The photograph of a young lady that you jumped into the river to save. Don't you remember?" Cecil smiled slightly and glanced at Kitty. "Did I say it was a photograph of a lady?" "No, you did not. But do you deny that it was?" "Certainly not, Mrs. Daly. I have the picture with me. I always have it." "And do you think that looks like seriousness, to be making such protestations to one girl with the portrait of another in your coat pocket? We have none of us forgotten, I think, that little conversation by the river." He saw my meaning now, and thanked me with a radiant look. "Here is the picture, Mrs. Daly. Whose portrait did you think it was? Surely you might have known, Kitty. This is the girl I wanted years ago and have wanted ever since, but she belonged to another man, and the man was my friend. I tried to save that man from insulting her and dishonoring himself, because I thought she loved him. Or, if he couldn't be saved, I wanted to expose him and save her. And I risked my own honor to do it, and a great fool I was for my pains. But this is the last time I shall make a fool of myself for your sake, Kitty." I rose now in earnest, and I would not be stayed. In point of fact, nobody tried to stay me. Kitty was looking at her own face with eyes as dim as the little water-stained photograph she held. And Cecil was on his knees beside her, whispering, "I stole it from Micky's room at the ranch. That was no place for it, anyhow. May I not have one of my own, Kitty?" I think he will get one of his own Kitty. Our rival schemer, Mr. Norman Fleet, has arrived, and electrical transmission has shaken hands with compressed air. The millennium must be on the way, for never did two men want so nearly the same thing, and yet agree to take each what the other does not need. Mr. Fleet does not want the earth either, nor all the waters thereof, but the most astonishing thing is, he doesn't want the Snow Bank. He not only doesn't want it himself, but is perfectly willing that Tom should have it. In fact, do what we will, it seems to be impossible for us to tread on the tail of that young man's coat. But having heard a little bird whisper that he is in love, and successfully so, I am not so surprised at his amiability. Neither am I altogether unprepared if the little bird's whisper be true, for the fact that Miss Malcolm is becoming reconciled to Tom's designs upon her beloved scenery. For the sake of consistency, and that pure devotion to the beautiful, so rare in this sordid age, I could have wished that she had not weakened so suddenly. But for Tom's sake I am very glad. She is clay in the hands of the potter, now that she knows my husband does not want all the water, and that his success does not mean the failure of Mr. Norman Fleet. Harshaw will take the Snow Bank scheme when he takes Kitty back to London. If he promotes it, I tell Tom, after the fashion in which he boomed Kitty's marriage to his cousin, we're not likely to see either him or the Snow Bank again. But Harshaw is all right, Tom says, and I believe that the luck is with him. End of Story 4, Part 4. End of A Touch of Sun and Other Stories by Mary Hallock Foote.